Good morning. I'm Mike Basil. I'm glad to be here. I'm the associate pastor here, and I'm trying to send a message, orange, black. Yeah, catch that? Okay. First off, I just want to say thank you to all of you. A lot of you guys were here last week and heard about what happened and was going on in the life of my family. And St. Matthew, we have appreciated all of the different ways that you as a community have come alongside of us with prayer, with meals, with all those things. We're just so incredibly lucky to be a part of a church that really cares. Just the other day, as I was singing through my life in this valley, we marked 15 years of being in Concord, California, in this area. For us, it's a long time, I'm 40, so you can figure out the math. 15 years ago, we came here, me and Juliana, without any kids, without anything, one car, headed for a church in Clayton, ready to make a difference in people's lives, And what's interesting is that I've spent almost half of those years here at St. Matthew, right? 7 years, yeah, it's good for me, and good for you guys, too. No. Yeah, but little did we know when we came out here what God had in store, right? But we're so glad that God has better plans than we could have ever imagined. And this leads me to our question this morning. Where do you turn when life goes upside down? Where do you turn when life goes upside down? We're going to spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just getting little groups, say hi to the person next to you, and you're going to talk about, where do you go? What brings you comfort? What brings you support? What brings you joy? Go, 2 minutes. Just talk to your neighbor. If you're on your own, find someone else. Be awkward. All righty. Sorry to cut you off if you didn't have a chance to share. This just gives you more reason to connect with that person afterwards at coffee over a donut and share where do you go when your life turns upside down. Let me do a little recap. We've been 2 weeks, this is our second week in this series about anxiety. And last week we talked about how anxiety is like this guard dog, right? That runs in the room barking, ready for action when something happens in your life. In some situations, our guard dog is great. But when the guard dog starts coming out at the wrong times, when there isn't an emergency or when you can no longer control that dog, that's when anxiety begins to get out of control. And again, I want to remind you that, getting professional help is a great way to deal with anxiety that you can no longer control. For me, I mentioned that 10 years ago, I had to get help. And if you find yourself in that place where you need some help, feel free, you can talk to me, Pastor Rustin, Pastor Lil, Pastor Tim, Pastor Tammy. We would love to help you find the resources that you need and get you the help that you need. We also talked about mindfulness. That was our take home, if you would, for the week. And we used Philippians 4:8 as a verse to meditate on every day. And I know we all did our homework. This week, I want to look at anxiety from a slightly different angle. What happens when life turns upside down? Where do you turn? I know that we all know that Jesus is the Sunday school answer, but this morning, I want to share some stories of why I think that is the right answer. Since I was young, for some reason, I always wanted to be a pastor. I know, crazy. And I don't know why that's the case, but it has been the case. And I have shared the stories about my Russian grandmother. This Ukrainian thing is really close to my heart, just because some of you know, my family left Russia, left Belarus actually before World War II, where my uncle was born in Belarus and my mom was born in Paraguay because they fled. And so this is a real deal. But anyways, my grandmother, my Russian grandmother, used to hold me on her lap, bounce me up and down, and pray over me that I would one day be a pastor. And yeah, prayers go far. I remember talking to my dad about this idea when I was in high school, saying, "Hey, Dad, I think I want to be a pastor." And my dad immediately looked at me and said, "No way." And he's like, "That's a terrible idea. You won't make any money and you'll never own a house." I can't say that he was wrong, but I remember, though, praying in that moment and telling God that, "God, I will not do this if I don't have the blessing of my family." And I left that to God, and I dropped it there. And no lie, a couple weeks later, my dad comes into my room, and something, I don't know what happened, but something in him changed. And he said, "Mike, if this is what you're wanting to do, I'm with you 100%. I'd be proud," and he still is proud to this day. So in fall of 2000, I enroll into Bethany College in Scotts Valley, Santa Cruz area down there. I went to become a pastor, and I loved it. As an extreme extrovert at the time, being around hundreds of people my age in one place doing life together, that was amazing. Staying up all night till like 1 a.m., going to the diner in Santa Cruz and, talking about life and ministry. Like, I was in heaven. I was living my best life, right? And during that process in 2001, we all know what happened in September and how the world changed in an instant. But in the summer of 2002, my world would change in an instant when I went on a summer camp trip and met my future wife. It was awesome. You meet your wife at summer camp. Yes, there you go. Grace, don't tell your students that. In fact, in 2002, a lot of things there would be a lot of major changes in my life. In the fall semester, during the Thanksgiving break, I was headed home, right? And how many of you guys know what a turkey bowl game is? Yeah? Okay. A turkey bowl game is simply basically when all the people who think they're athletes get together and we decide to play football. And rain or shine, it doesn't matter, we get together and we play. And so at this particular Thanksgiving break, we had a turkey bowl game that I was at and we're playing. And believe it or not, at the time, I was athletic. I actually played college a little bit in baseball, and I played intramural sports, that kind of stuff. But, intramural sports doesn't matter. But, to Grace it matters, I know, okay. But playing this turkey bowl game, right? And knowing the rules to a game are very helpful. They keep you from getting injured. And so I was running to catch a pass, and someone who will not be named came alongside or came at me from the other direction, thinking that they should block me from getting the ball. And so what they did is they jumped at me, put their elbow out, and they hit me in the face. Owie, yeah. I didn't think anything of it. I go home, and then when I get home, I look in the mirror, and I realize that part of my face is actually indented. And I'm like, that's weird. And I'm like, okay, that will pop out in a couple days, right? Because that's what's supposed to happen, right? A couple days later, I start having issues opening my mouth. I can only open my mouth about a finger width. And I'm like, I think something's wrong here. And being the college student that I was, I said, you know what, maybe I'll go to the doctor. And remember those good old days where you could call up your doctor and go the same day? I did that, and it was awesome. I called my doctor, and they said, yeah, you should come in. And I came in, and they looked at my face, they're like, And they're like, we should get some x-rays. I'm like, okay, that's great. Get some x-rays, and all of a sudden, they're like, hey, your face is broken. I'm like, who would have thought? what happened is I broke my zygomatic arch, and it's a bone that goes over your jaw muscle. And so instead of having a nice arch, I had the McDonald's arches in my face. Not a good thing. And the bones impinged on my jaw muscle, and they're like, hey, we need to fix this now. I'm like, okay, what does now mean? Like tomorrow. I'm like, oh. So I call my dad and all this stuff. And again, remember when it was easy to get in the hospital, get booked and all that stuff? The next day I'm in surgery. And so it was supposed to be an easy process where they, do a little incision here, a little incision in my mouth. They get basically, their crowbar, for lack of a better term, and they, pop the arch out and it goes back to normal. In and out, under an hour surgery. So I go in, I go under, and I wake up. And when I wake up, it's like dark. And I went in the morning, and now it's dark at night. And I'm like, it's summertime. Well, it's not summer, it's fall still, but it's like, what's going on here? They're like, hey, you might feel some stuff around your head. Surgery went a little longer than we thought. I was like, how long? Like 6 hours. Oh, okay, 6 hours. What happened? And so I kind of start, touching my head, and I feel my head's all bandaged. I'm like, what did you do to me? I didn't look that bad. No. What they had to do is, because the arch was so badly broken, is literally they cut me from the top of my head down to my ear, peeled off my face. Pretty gross, huh? And fixed it. Those of you who are like nerds and like that surgery stuff on TV, you're probably like, yes, that's cool. You have any pictures? No, I don't. I hate that stuff. And so I have it fixed. And as you know, this is Thanksgiving. That means there's still weeks left of my semester. And the doctor says, hey, you have to sleep sitting up for the next 6 weeks, because if you sleep wrong or on your face, we could have to do this again. So this is, again, where having an advocate is a good thing, because I didn't understand college. My parents, they're both immigrants to the country. My dad has like an 8th grade education. I started having to do, my own educational stuff at 8th grade and on, because, parents couldn't help anymore. So this college thing was still new to me. I'm figuring things out, and I'm like, I'll email my teachers and tell them, whatever. And anyways, lo and behold, I don't go back the rest of that semester. I end up failing my classes because I didn't go through the right processes to talk to administration, to do all that stuff. And so I go back to school finally the next semester with academic probation. Face is broken. I'm healing from that. There's that physical trauma that's going on. I get called into the office when I get back into school that next semester. And this is where life gets even crazier, because 2003 would be a year where my life would be forever altered. I get called in the office, and the dean says, hey, I have a question for you. I'm like, okay. Tell me every girl that you've hung out with this last semester. And I'm like, what? That's a weird question. And I'm like, okay. So I start going down the list. It's not a long list. Super long. No. And when I get to one girl, he says, stop. Tell me more about that girl. I'm like, well, we went on a couple of dates, this and that. And this is where my life gets really, really crazy, because the dean accused me of things that I didn't do. And I don't want to use those words in this service, but let's just say I was accused of things that I did not do. And I was told that my future and my dreams of working in the church were over. There was no more hope. And I didn't know what to do, but the dean told me, hey, you got to keep this quiet. You can't share a word of it, because we don't want the school to look bad. We don't want you to look bad. We just want everything to be quiet. Keep this between us. So as a 20-year-old guy that doesn't know any better, I said, okay. Talk about anxiety, fear, despair, your world being turned upside down in an instant. Where do you go when your life turns upside down? This is our psalm. Hear my cry, O God. Listen to my prayer. I didn't know what to do or where to turn, and nothing else happened. So I was like left in this limbo state of what is going on. A month later, I was called again into the office with more threats of actions and things that are supposed to happen. I was again told I had to keep quiet. And I would get called into the office a third time, and then finally a fourth time. And the fourth time, I was told that legal action was incoming. I was told that I would need a lawyer, that I was going to be arrested. And I didn't know what to do. Again, as a 20-year-old, Not supposed to tell anyone. I didn't tell family. I didn't tell friends. I was holding on to this because I didn't know what to do. And finally, after the fourth meeting where I was told this stuff, I didn't know what to do, so I crossed the street. And luckily, from where the administration building across the street was our school's chapel. And we had a 24-hour prayer room. And so I went into the prayer room and I began to pray. From the ends of the earth, I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. I remember praying vividly because unlike times before, I just remember this situation, and I remember praying so passionately to God, saying, God, I don't know what's going on. God, I don't know what to do. God, where are you? And in this moment, in that instant, something different happened to me. And I remember a peace that came over me that I'd never experienced before. And I remember a voice saying, this ends tonight. And so, of course, I thought, great, now I'm going to die. And so because I was in this place again where, life was hard. I was scared. I was like, God, I don't know what this ends tonight means. At this point in my ordeal, anxiety was so overcoming that my grades again were suffering. I couldn't be in large groups of people. I couldn't go to our cafe for meals because the lights and the people and the noise it would make me freeze up. Believe it or not, I was missing meals. Why is that funny? I couldn't fall asleep at night. I was missing classes, and when I did fall asleep, it was usually because I cried myself to sleep. But that night was different. I went to my room. I fell asleep. My phone rang that night, but I missed it. I was deep. I was off in La La Land. For you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the foe. I long to dwell in your tent forever and take refuge in the shelter of your wings. The next morning, I was woken up by a ringing of my phone. And so I was like, okay, I got it. I answered it, and it was the dean. And he said, Mike. I said, yes. He's like, hey, I want to let you know that you don't have to worry anymore. We found out who did it, and you're good. Have a great day. Like, I wish I could say that in that moment, my anxiety and my fears and all that stuff ended as quickly as that phone call did, but that wasn't the case. 20 years later, as I prepared this message, I had to stop multiple times and take breaks because the trauma is still fresh. I had a hard time working on this thing this week. In this passage, David is living in this trauma too. It seems like his life is going from one trauma to the next, right? Some because of others' choices, some because of his choice, and some because of just life. And in this passage, scholars seem to think and agree that David was probably in this point of his life where he was, what's the word I'm looking for? I lost it. But he's with Absalom and he's fleeing from Absalom. That's the word I'm looking for, fleeing from Absalom. And he's trying to stay alive and maintain his kingdom because his son is trying to basically take over. And in my case and in David's case, the only thing we knew how to do was go to God. Now, I wish that David's story ended better. I wish mine was fixed the moment I prayed. And for some, you get that miracle, right? It happens instantaneously. But in David's story and in mine, it still meant there were tough things up and coming. David's son would die. I would continue to experience trauma until I realized I needed help. And again, I say that 20 years later, this trauma is still real. But there's a verse that's helped me in this process. And I hate this verse, by the way. It's Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. God doesn't take things away, but instead, he takes what is given and he promises to beautify it. Someone sent me this, this joke, I guess, this week. And this is where I'm going to read it to you and end with it. We'll see if you guys like it. It says, a visiting pastor attended a men's breakfast in the middle of a rural farming area of the country. And the group asked the older farmer, decked out in bib overalls, to say grace for that morning's breakfast. And so he began to pray. Lord, I hate buttermilk. That's what I imagine his voice to be. The farmer began. The visiting pastor opened an eye and glanced at the farmer and wondering where this was going. And the farmer loudly proclaimed, Lord, I hate lard. Now the pastor was growing concerned. And without missing a beat, the farmer continued, and Lord, you know how much I don't care for raw white flour. The pastor again opened his eye, glanced around the room, and saw that he wasn't the only one that felt uncomfortable. But then the farmer added, but Lord, when you mix the biscuits, or when you mix them all together and bake them, I do love warm, fresh biscuits. So Lord, let's pray. When things come up that we don't like, when life gets hard, when we don't understand what you're saying to us, help us to relax and wait until you're finished mixing. It will probably be better than we could ever imagine. In your name we pray. Amen.